Hello, I'm RBrooks. I'm the founder of RBrooks Group, a retained C-suite search firm. We're based out of Boulder, Colorado. And we do retained search work for companies both in the United States and Europe, where I tend to focus on CEO searches and board searches. I've got a team that helps me out with those, plus they take on other C-suite assignments, chief commercials, CFOs, lots of clin reg, and other commercial roles. So interestingly that I'm here at this conference and a sponsor because it turns out that about 40% of our revenue over the last 5 years actually comes from Europe. And so people say, why is that? And some of it is just showing up. I get to know a lot of people in Europe. The other thing is around the story of value creation. All these technologies, if we don't conquer the US market, they lack that significant exit value that will attract investors. So eventually we need to get the US figured out. So we come in and do CEO searches. Either the CEO goes to Europe for a period of time, like Dave Marver over at Onward or Lloyd Diamond at Pixium. They come to the Europe, or we find somebody in the U.S. that ends up taking over the company, or sometimes they just become a U.S. president. Is about chess and not checkers. A typical search process most people do is kind of like checkers. They collect all the actively looking people, and the company decides which is best from the actively looking and goes forward. Where chess is more of a deep dive. And it's a deep dive into the thinking of who are all the possible people, who are all the best players, and figuring out who they are, and then not being afraid to approach them. And it's okay if you approach 10 A players and you get 9 no's because you only need 1. So we tend to try to go after the people who are not necessarily actively looking. I'm not sure if there was a group of people with more retained experience in the medical device industry. Together, myself, Charlie, and Dan have over 80 years of search experience, of talking to and with various people in the executive roles throughout our industry. And then, of course, we track it all. And you can imagine not only that conversation, but when we're speaking with someone, we're often double-clicking. But we heard that a few times last night, a double-click. But we'll double-click on their LinkedIn profile, and we take a look at all their shared connections, and we look at those and say, who are the people I don't know much about that I'd like to know more about, and so that they would know well. And so we ask a lot of questions of a lot of people, and we track that. And that's how it helps us deliver people that end up being highly thought of and highly regarded. The thing I can do, because I've been doing it so long, is I can take a look at searches that have been done, and I can look at it and I can tell how deep they dove, because I usually understand the field enough where I'll know if they're actively looking or if somebody actually did a deep dive in building out that field. And so it's something we do, but other firms do it as well. And when a lot of companies, most positions are still filled internally. And so anybody who's a CEO, board member, or executive, when you think about search, don't think about just collecting the actively looking people. Do a deep dive into all the people that you think could be a match, and be okay with the rejection you're going to face. I went back and I looked at all of our recently completed searches. I think it was over the last 5 to 7 years. And was astounded. First of all, we end up with a 100% completion rate. What that means, once we engage in a search, we don't stop until it's finished, until we've got the person in place. Whereas sometimes there's stats out there that there's a lot of firms that don't quite finish all their searches. So that's the caveat. Sometimes clients cancel a search midstream. And when I did this retroactive study, I was absolutely thrilled to see that 99% of the people we put in place over the last 5 to 7 years made it through their first year. And of course, excluding rifts of, we know the financing world. Sometimes we have to make cuts because we don't have funding and financing, and that's the risk of our business. But I was even more impressed with the 2-year retention rate. 95% of our people we put in place are still there after 2 years. And so that doesn't come from luck or because we don't manufacture the people. It comes from that process of having a really strong short list. You don't get to a strong short list without a really good long list, and you don't get there unless you do a really deep dive. So I think doing that deep dive allows us to end up with a nice short list that helps our clients win. So first up,